السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين، أما بعد. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So today inshallah is going to be day 5 of our Ramadan Tajweed series. And as always, we're going to begin with a recap. So today we're going to just do a recap of day 4. On day 4, which was this past Sunday, we discussed the third rule of Noon, Sakin, and Tanween, which is known as Iqlab. And I mentioned previously that the word Iqlab comes from the word Qalb, which means the heart. And the reason why it's called Iqlab is because the way the human heart is that it changes in its feelings. So, for example, one day you really like something and you really want something, but then the next day your heart is not inclined to it anymore. So, similarly, this ideology of change is what characterizes iqlab. And Imam al-Jamzuri rahimahullah tells us, وَالثَّالِثُ الْإِقْلَابُ عِنْدَ الْبَاءِ مِيمًا بِغُنَّةٍ مَعَ الْإِخْفَاءِ, that the third rule of iqlab takes place whenever there's a ba that follows either the noon sakin or the tanween. And the sound that, so here's where we see the change taking place. The translation of iqlab is that the sound turns into the sound of a meme, and you're supposed to nasalize it, like we mentioned last time, and you're supposed to prolong the sound. And then ma'al ikhfa. Now we're actually going to go more into detail with this today. So before we move on, so iqlab refers to the sound changes into a meme while nasalizing and prolonging the sound, and this only takes place when you see the letter ba. And then we also mentioned last class that there were two opinions. The first opinion is when you make the sound of iqlab, or when you apply the rule of iqlab, you either close your mouth completely or you can keep your mouth slightly open. Both opinions are correct. You can choose which one you want based on what your teacher tells you to do. Personally, I do the closed mouth opinion because that's what I was taught by my teachers. So for example, when reciting any of the examples, this is what we would do. So we would say كَلَّا لَيُنْبَذَنَّ, or the second opinion where we keep the mouth slightly open, كَلَّا لَيُنْبَذَنَّ. But either way, you should be applying the rule of iqlab in a way where it's changing the sound of the noon into a sound of a meme. Just like the next example, mim bayni farthin. And the main thing to keep in mind is that we're nasalizing the sound and we're also prolonging it. So doing ghunna and ikhfa. And just like that in the last example, kulu washrabu hani'an. And that is it for iqlab. So that's just the recap of what we went over last class. So today, inshallah, we're going to discuss the fourth and final rule of noon sakin and tanween, which is known as ikhfa. Now, the topic on ikhfa is a little longer, so what we're going to do is we're just going to break it into 2 days. So we're going to begin talking about it today, and then continue it next class, but we'll just try to get through as much as we can today. So Imam al-Jamzuri rahimahullah, he continues his poem, and the next line goes, وَالرَّابِعَ الْإِخْفَاءُ عِنْدَ الْفَاضِلِ مِنَ الْحُرُوفِ وَاجِبٌ لِلْفَاضِلِ. So to break this down, he's telling us that the fourth rule is known as ikhfa. And ikhfa literally translates to conceal something. Like as we go on into talking about the letters themselves and the examples, it'll make more sense as to why it's called to conceal. But basically what we're doing whenever we see ikhfa take place is that we're concealing the sound of noon or the sound of tanween into the letter that comes after. And what we mean by this is, for example, one example in the Quran that's very popular is I think the first couple ayahs of Surah Baqarah, وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ. So with the word unzila, za is one of the letters of ikhfa, and we see that there's a nun sakin that precedes it. And what we're doing is that we're concealing the sound of nun into the letter after. And we do this in a way where like we're prolonging the sound and we're kind of nasalizing it as well. So وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ. And we'll go more into depth with that. So the next line of his poem goes, and he continues and he says, في خمسة من بعد عشر رمزها في كلم هذا البيت قد ضمنتها. And I believe we're supposed to stop for the commercial break, so inshallah after the break we'll go into more details about the different letters of ikhfa.
Sheikh Abdul Hakim, a frequent speaker at MCMC, said something very profound. He said, I've been to hundreds of masajid all over the country, and whenever I've seen people raise their hands in response to an appeal, there's always this big smile on their face. Subhanallah, just let that sink in. It's like, imagine if someone jumps in a swimming pool, it is 100% guaranteed that this person will get wet. Similarly, once we donate for the sake of Allah, it's like jumping in a pool filled with happiness. You are guaranteed to be drenched in happiness. Brothers and sisters, we are reaching out to you with an urgent appeal regarding MCMC operations. There has been no Jummah collection for almost 2 months now, and now with the masjid closed during Ramadan, it is indeed a huge financial burden. Ramadan is the time we collect funds that enable us to do hundreds of programs throughout the year. We collect funds to improve our security, to improve the overall facility, and to do outreach work throughout the year. Times are tough, and no doubt there are hundreds of good causes to donate, but upkeeping your home has to be the #1 priority. If MCMC is where you pray your daily prayers, if this is the place where you pray Jummah, Taraweeh, Eid, if this is the place where your kids learn about Allah and His Messenger, then this is your home. this is your primary responsibility to maintain your home. Please visit mcmcnj.org/themasjid and support and upkeep your home. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and your family and fill your heart with happiness.
All right, we're back. So, uh, continuing the discussion of ikhfa. So, Imam al-Jamzuri rahimahullah tells us in this poem that في خمسة من بعد عشر رمزها في كلم هذا البيت قد ضمنتها. So he tells us that there are a total of 15 letters of ikhfa. Now, because this is the, I'd say, most confusing rule of the four rules of Nun Sakin and Tanween, we're going to spend a little more time on this. But to begin, there's a total of 15 letters, and I have all of the letters listed on the slides. So the first is Sod, the, Tha, Kaf, Jim, Shin, Qaf, Sin, Dal, Ta, Zay, Fa, Ta, and Dad, and Dha. So all of these 15 letters are known as the letters of ikhfa, and whenever we see nun sakin or tanween followed by any of these 15 letters, we know that ikhfa is taking place. And this is definitely one of the tajweed rules that takes place the most in the Quran, like one of the tajweed rules that takes place the most in the Quran, because so many letters, this rule applies to so many different letters. And the second part of the poem where he says fi kalmi hadha al-bayti qad dammantuha, we'll go into more detail on this next week because I didn't add that part of the poem to my slides today. But basically, Imam al-Jamzuri rahimahullah, as we saw in the previous rules as well, he tries to present different words or phrases to help you remember the different rules. So like, remember for the rule of idgham, he had the word yarmulun, which was all 6 letters of idgham, and then he also gave us the word yanmu, which was for the different letters of idgham with ghanna. So he tends to do things like that, and he actually also provides like a sentence to remember, where each word in the sentence, the first letter is one of the letters of ikhfa, but we'll go into more detail on that next class. But yeah, so one thing that I do want to emphasize on is that because ikhfa is a larger rule and comprises of more letters, this is something that we should definitely try to identify as we're reciting Quran. So during your daily recitation, just try to, actually try to actively look for rules of ikhfa, try to identify as you're reciting. And then just know that whenever you see it, just try to nasalize it and elongate it. So for example, like we mentioned earlier, the ayah in Surah Baqarah, وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ. And just like that, that could be a similar such scenario for any one of the 15 letters that we mentioned here. So with that, I conclude. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الصلاة خير من النوم الصلاة خير من النوم ألا صلوا في بيوتكم ألا صلوا في بيوتكم الله أكبر الله أكبر لا